Welcome to the second part of lung pathology. Here we're going to move away from lists and definitions so much and divulge more into the more applied concepts. And this part is actually the part we'll basically focus on tomorrow, especially when we do all the applied parts of the lung pathology. Okay. As I will always do, reminder here of the objectives of this part of lung pathology. You can see the list is extensive, but we will remember that we would have covered a lot of this stuff in the previous section, part 1, and now we concentrate more in the slightly more complicated aspects of lung pathology. So I'd suggest you take a few seconds and just look at the image at the bottom right of the screen. And think about exactly, first of all, the organ that we're in and what pathology you think there might be there. You can pause the video and see how far you get, but otherwise I'm going to carry on with it. So this is basically what we would term pulmonary embolism and thrombosis. You can see the arterial walls are distended and plugged with material, and the lung, which is supposed to be a nice blushing color, is no longer that, but except it's now a deep red color, almost like a liver. And you can only imagine how poorly it flows through this lung. So these different explanations of the different type of emboli and thromboemboli are in your notes, in your study notes. I've taken the liberty to just take them and put them in a table so you can compare the different types and see what the different causes are and what the different sequelae are. In one of the cases that I did recently for biopsies, we actually had brain tissue that was present in a capillary in the lung under the microscope. And that is something that we'd refer to as a brain embolus, a brain tissue embolus. And that had happened because the animal had suffered severe head trauma, and a piece of the brain had actually broken off, gone into one of the capillaries, which was also obviously damaged. As the blood was flowing through, it carried on with the blood flow through circulation, and then ended up getting stuck in one of the smaller capillaries in the pulmonary blood vessels, and which is quite cool. And it just comes to show the different types of emboli and basically give an overall understanding of what we mean by emboli. Pulmonary thrombosis can also be the thrombosis of lymphatic vessels. In this case here, in this image, is showing a case of contagious bovine pleural pneumonia, and you can see the lymphatics are distended, which is supposed to actually take the accumulated fluid away from the alveolar epithelium, from the alveolar spaces, via the lymphatics and take it away from the lung. However, in this case, because the lymphatics are also inflamed and blocked, then you get the fluid trying to get into the lymphatics, but then it gets distended and blocked and doesn't go anywhere. Pulmonary infarcts are unlikely because of the collateral blood supply that you get. If one arterial supply cannot supply the oxygen-rich blood, then the other arterial supply within the lung can do so. Congestive heart failure and pulmonary thromboembolism both compromise the circulatory system because the lungs are already hypoxic due to vascular status. And the sequelae there would be congestion, edema, and atelectasis, involving mostly the larger vessels. Complete distension of the alveoli or lung can be divided basically into a congenital or an acquired atelectasis. While the acquired atelectasis, you get the different, based on the cause, can either be a compressive or obstructive. So depicted in this image is an image of basically a normal fetal lung. Okay. You can see the color is different. It's not that lovely peach color that we spoke about earlier. It's also much firmer to touch, so it wouldn't be soft and containing air when you palpate it. And should you put a section of this lung in normal water, it would definitely sink to the bottom. The fetus basically, as you know, would not have inspired air at any point in time. So the lungs here would contain only fecal fluid instead of air. And then when the fetus or the animal is born, the fluid is then rapidly reabsorbed and then replaced with air. And then you get your fluffy, soft textured, pale pink lung that we expect for a normal lung. And that also coincides then with normal alveolar distension. I mentioned earlier that we get different types of atelectasis, and those are congenital or acquired. Right now we're going to look at congenital atelectasis, and atelectasis basically is pathology, right? So it's not a normal fetal presentation, meaning the animal should have inspired air, the alveoli should have filled with air, but it failed to inflate the lungs. So it didn't happen. The normal process of breathing did not take place as it should have. This can occur as a result of an obstructive atelectasis. Should the fetus be stressed within the womb, then it may aspirate amniotic fluid and meconium, and then that will be an obstructive atelectasis in a way. Also, if there's an alteration in the quality and the quantity of the pulmonary surfactant, which is part of the fluid that is in the alveoli while it's still in the uterus, the alveoli will end up not being able to distend and remain distended after the initial aeration. So the fetus is born, and because of the poor quality or the quantity of the surfactant, the alveoli get air in but doesn't remain distended. And it's often referred to as hyaline membrane disease, and affects often foals and piglets, and commonly it is called Barker's disease because of the sounds they make. Depicted in the slide is an image of an atelectatic lung, and this type of atelectasis differs from the congenital atelectasis we discussed just now. With congenital atelectasis, a lung that should have distended with air did not. In this case, you can see that at some point the lung had distended with air, it had inflated. However, post-inflation, you've got areas, a locally extensive area that is dark purple and depressed below the surface of the adjacent aerated alveoli, and is most likely more solid or firmer to the touch. Air in this situation cannot reach the lung parenchyma. Dogs have a good collateral ventilation, so you'd need obstruction of a lobar or segmental bronchus for atelectasis to develop in a dog. Cattle, however, and to some extent sheep, even if there's obstruction of the small bronchus or bronchioles, it can result in atelectasis. Okay? It's important that you know the difference between compressive and obstructive atelectasis. Compressive atelectasis is, as you can see there on the schematic drawing above, on the top of the slide, you've got a normal alveolus, how it should look, then you've got BNC. Looking at the explanation I've listed here and tried to explain, trying to highlight the difference between compressive and obstructive, try and think which of those two would actually be between B and C would be obstructive atelectasis, which would be compressive atelectasis, and why. This we'll discuss further in class, and hopefully you were correct. Here I describe basically what atelectasis looks like microscopically. If you're asked to describe atelectatic lesion you should be able to basically go through these different steps, identifying all these steps, and be able to say why you're saying the lesion is atelectasis. When the volume of air entering a lung is greater than the volume of air that leaves the lung, you get what you call emphysema. Primary emphysema does not occur in animals. It's a terminology and lesion that is used in human pathology, and we don't usually get primary emphysema. In animals, the closest to a primary emphysema that you can get is obstruction to the outflow of air, and especially during slaughter, during agonal, during death basically. So it's an agonal lesion. What we do have in animals is a secondary emphysema, and that often occurs with bronchopneumonia. Reason being, you get airflow imbalance, right? The exudates will plug certain parts of the bronchioles or the bronchi. Those will no longer be able to deflate, and with the exertion and trying to get air in, it can't get out. The air inspired is greater than the air expired, and then you get emphysema secondary to the bronchopneumonia. If you look at the image on your right, here you need to be very careful because the darker areas are actually inflamed lung and not necessarily atelectatic lung. The lighter areas are the emphysematous areas, okay, where there's more air that enter than what can leave because of the plugs that you find in the bronchioles and the bronchi because of the presence of pneumonia and exudate. Okay, so let's delve on this more also in class. It's important to understand the classification of emphysema. You get two different types, alveolar emphysema and interstitial emphysema, and these classifications are based on the localization of the emphysema within the lung. The lung parenchyma has variably sized air bubbles in alveolar emphysema, while in interstitial emphysema, because of the pulmonary anatomy of cattle and their wide interlobular septa and the lack of lateral ventilation of the lobules, together with forced respiration at high pressure, the air will break into the loose connective tissue of the septa. Think about in this slide, if you're looking at the lung, which type of emphysema do you think we're dealing with here? Think about that, and then let's see if you were correct when we get to class and discuss this further. Bullous emphysema refers to a disease process. It's basically when the smaller air bubbles that would have accumulated, which are also emphysematous and are a lesion, form large pockets of air, and then we refer to them as bulla. Go through the slide and the corresponding parts of this content in your notes and see if you can work out exactly what I'm trying to depict here as to the sequelae of severe interstitial emphysema, basically how that can result in a subcutaneous emphysema, what route it follows to get there, and peritoneal emphysema. Here I've got the different emphysema processes or sequelae. As I spoke about earlier, the bullous emphysema, you can actually end up getting lesions that are at the size of centimeters in diameter and size. You can get a neuromediastinum. Think about the process that we discussed just now, about how it follows through up until it gets to subcutaneous emphysema. Cor pulmonale is a disease process that occurs with chronic pulmonary disease, which is often associated with continuous pulmonary hypoxia. It's common in humans, but can occur also in cattle and pigs because of their anatomy. Let's touch base on this in class. For now, go through the slide, see if you can formulate your own understanding of it, and then we'll take it from there. End of the section of respiratory pathology, and I hope you have taken the time to build some sort of basis or foundation on which we'll build on tomorrow in class with more applied work, and you realize that lung pathology is not all that difficult. General pathology is basically the basis of everything that you're going to do, and everything else just builds onto it. So at this time, I would ask you to take a deep breath in, a deep breath out. For in case you're a little bit nervous, like I was actually, it helps to calm those nerves. And I hope to see you tomorrow in class. Bye.